The Florida Gators will host their second straight orange and blue game on a Thursday night. We believe there are some major pros for this and some cons that you need to know about right now. Today, we're going to talk to you guys about the truth behind the spring game being on a Thursday, let you hear from some experts, and chat about some of the visitors headlining the big visit weekend. We even have some insight about a 5-star that's visiting, so make sure you stay tuned until the end to get more on that. Okay, here is my take on the spring game being on a Thursday. Honestly, I don't love it, but I do understand it. I don't love it for a couple of reasons. One, growing up as a child, the daughter of a former player, I loved all the activities that were planned for former players and their families around the spring game. Lots of former players came to campus. They brought their families. The families got to know each other. I think that that's really good for the long-term health of any football program, right? You want to keep your former players around you and close. Thursday night just makes it a little bit more difficult because if guys live, outside of Gainesville, more than likely they're not able to make the trip, or at least not with their families because their children have school. Fans, same reason why I don't love Thursday night for them. Fans have to work if they're not located in Gainesville, which the majority of fans are not located in Gainesville. They are less likely to travel because they have work and school the next day. I really don't love it on a Thursday because of that. I will tell you what I do love about it being on Thursday night, a night game. I think it's amazing to invite recruits to the Swamp for a simulated night game, which is what these spring games have become. I can remember sitting in the Swamp sweating for a 1 p.m. kickoff or a 3 p.m. kickoff. Nobody has any interest in doing that when it's not August and the real season. So I think it's awesome to have the spring game be at night. Let fans and recruits get to experience the fireworks, the band, all of the cool things that come from a night game in the Swamp. Now, we know that this game is moved to a Thursday night for recruiting purposes, and last year that was highly successful. The list of uncommitted recruits that showed up in the Swamp last spring game was massive. This year's list, though, is a lot smaller. I'll tell you exactly why I think that is. Last year's game was the Thursday night prior to Easter. These kids did not have school on Friday, so it was okay for them to go to a spring game on Thursday night, then travel to Athens or Tuscaloosa or wherever they were going to go for their Saturday spring game. And it was successful for the Gators. They got commitments from the guys that showed up on campus on that Thursday night. I think that the list of prospects for 2024 uncommitted recruits this year is smaller because there is school in the state of Florida on Friday this year. So I think that there's a lot of guys who aren't going to miss school on Friday and maybe even Thursday to be able to get to the Swamp. So I think that's why you'll see this list be a little bit smaller. But I do think that the main purpose of them moving this game was recruiting in hopes that they could get some guys in Gainesville who are maybe on their way to another spring game that was being played on Friday or on Saturday and let them experience everything UF has to offer and potentially sway them. I do think if this game doesn't get the kind of commitments out of it like last year's game did, that this staff is smart. They'll adjust. They'll figure out, okay, well, maybe it is better for it to be on Saturday or at the very least on a Thursday or a Friday so that there's not school the next day for these kids. And from my perspective, if you can't convince a guy to pick UF's spring game over Alabama's spring game or Georgia's spring game or Clemson's spring game, you don't really have a chance with that recruit anyway, right? If you can't even get them to the game, they're not committing to UF, at least if they're not in the 2024 class. I can see maybe it being more valuable for the 2025, 2026 guys because it's just getting them to experience campus at all and they have a really long time left in this recruiting journey. But as far as guys for the 2024 class, I don't know how beneficial this game will end up being on a Thursday night for UF. We'll see, but I trust this staff, and I trust that if it is successful, they'll continue to do this because it's the right thing for the program, and if it's not successful, that they'll adapt. They've already shown us that they are very capable of pivoting and taking, an outside approach, looking at everything really, really level-headedly and making moves accordingly. So I do think that, if they need to change, they will, and I totally trust them to do that. Okay, so here's what several guys who are very close to the program had to say about it being on a Thursday. Before we get to those, I want to hear your thoughts. Comment below on why you think the spring game on a Thursday is a good thing or a bad thing, or maybe it doesn't matter at all. First up, we've got Zach Alberverdi.
I get I get the motivation behind doing it. It is, I think, more recruiting based than anything.
Sure.
I mean, maybe there is something to be said about attendance not being as high if you do it Easter weekend. This is a recruiting ploy. I think more than anything, it works because now you're not having to compete with all these other schools that are having spring games on a Saturday. So I get it.
Next up, Corey Bender was pretty positive on it.
It's interesting. So I think there's two ways to look at it. I think having it on the Thursday, the hard part is kids are back in school at that time. Mm-hmm. So that's the difficult part when it comes to kind of getting kids from out of state on campus for a Thursday. The positive I like about it, you're separate from everyone else. So that Saturday, I assume there's probably spring games all across the country. Right. So you have to pick and choose where you want to go. Florida can kind of separate themselves. I mean, last year's turnout was great. So if you want to look at kind of just the results of what's happened, they hosted like 300 kids last year. So they got the kids on campus, but I just think for out-of-state kids, when you're a national brand like Florida, it's going to be tough, getting these kids out of school and, hey, can you come down and, flights and all that. So it's you can look at it two different ways, but I'm going to lean towards it's a good thing just based off how last year was because it was a tremendous result with how many kids were on campus.
Nick De La Torre said he was interested in seeing this year's commit list, but admitted it was huge for UF last year.
I'm interested to see how many guys, what the offer list or what the visitor list will look like for the spring game. Florida's made a point 2 years in a row now to make the spring game on a Thursday. And some fans don't like it. I get it. It's hard to take off work on a Thursday and a Friday. I get that. But if you look at what Florida would be competing against, I think there's more than 30 spring games that Saturday. So the opportunity to get somebody up on Thursday, hey, stay the night Thursday. We'll see the game, talk to you Thursday night. You can tour the facility on Friday and then go on to Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, one of the schools that's having their spring game that Saturday. So for me, I'm interested to see what that list is like because last year of the guys that they really targeted and really wanted, they pretty much got everybody that was there for the spring game. So I'm going to be keeping a keen eye on that spring game list and who shows up.
Finally, Blake Alderman was the highest on it. Here's what he had to say.
Last year when I saw it was set on a Thursday, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this is dumb. It's on a Thursday. Like, why would they do this? But the turnout was much better than I expected from a recruiting standpoint. They had a lot of big-time guys. I don't know that there was somebody that they wouldn't have landed had it been on a Saturday compared to a Thursday. Mm-hmm. You're not competing, as far as trying to have these guys decide between do I visit, Florida or, the 13 other schools that have their spring games that Saturday. So I think that was, something that allowed them to get so many kids on campus the way they did. So, I was pleasantly surprised with how many guys they had on campus there. Whenever I heard it was on a Thursday, I'm like, man, there's going to be like 3 kids in the stand. Like, there's no way that's going to work. I was surprised how the turnout was there. So, I'm interested to see how that works out, this year, if that they're going to have that same success there. But I think it is worth noting that if you don't have to compete with having these kids choose between all these other different schools that have their spring games the same day, it certainly seemed to work last year, and I don't see why it couldn't work again this year.
Florida has some really important recruits on campus for the game. Just very quickly, here are our top 5. Xavier Filsaime. Guys, he is the number 2 overall safety. He is trending really heavily to UF. I really think that this spring game could be a huge difference maker in his recruitment. We have an exclusive update on him and we'll share that with our members. So hit the join button if you want to see more there. But I do think that this game could be very important for him. Next up, Colin Simmons. He is the number 1 edge rusher in the country. He is a 5-star on all 4 recruiting sites. He is truly elite. If UF were to be able to secure a commitment from Colin Simmons, it would be huge for Billy Napier. Everybody in the country wants this kid, and the fact that UF is even in the conversation for him at all is a really good sign and speaks very highly of this coaching staff. Next, let's look at Kendall Jackson. On3 top 300 kid. He's a 4-star on their site. He is 6'3", 245-pound D lineman out of Gainesville. So guys, he's just taking a hop, skip, and the jump over to the swamp from his house. He is a local kid. I don't know that a spring game is going to overly impress him because, listen, he's grown up here. He knows what UF is all about. But it's still huge to have him show up on a night where he's going to get to rub elbows with guys like DJ Lagway and really see what this team is about and feel the energy in the swamp. We've also got Kevin Levy coming. We spoke about him in our last recruiting video. He's a 3-star cornerback who put UF in his top 3 class as soon as they offered. Y'all, he wants to be a Gator. I think that he could be on commitment watch this weekend. And lastly, Trey Horn. He's a 3-star athlete on both On3 and 24/7. UF, FSU, Virginia Tech, NC State are all involved in his commitment. They all want him. He is pretty high on the Gators, so I definitely think that this is somebody that's very important to get into town. It's a great thing for UF that he's going to be at the spring game. Several current commits and a lot of younger guys are also going to be on campus for this game. I already mentioned, but of course, DJ Lagway, Graham, Simmons, and others are going to be in the swamp for this game. Them being there is great. It is really important for guys that are already committed to this class to be rubbing elbows with guys that are thinking about joining this class or even a future class. Stay tuned to the channel, and if you want the inside info that we're hearing on Xavier Filsaime, go check out the join button by clicking right here. We'll talk to you guys soon. Go Gators!